Welcome back to Over the Edge podcast. Oh boy, do I have a special guest star this week. I've known Emily for quite a few years now, and so I'm so excited to introduce you to Emily. Emily Merrell is the founder and business coach at Second Degree Society, co-founder of Ready, Set, Coach, and podcast host of The Sixth Degree and Ready, Set, Coach podcasts. She's also lovingly called 20 Questions by those that know her, and to those that come to know her, you'll quickly understand why. After a 9-month post-college stint in the Buenos Aires, Argentina area, Emily launched her career in the fashion world, working in special events and marketing for high luxury brands like Ralph Lauren, Tory Burch, and Intermix. Since her leap into entrepreneurship in 2016, Emily's expertise in community building, networking, and business coaching has been applauded and featured by Refinery29, Brit Co, Girlboss, Forbes, Create and Cultivate, Huffington Post, and event attendees like yours truly. I sing Emily's praises all the time. She's a recent Denver transplant from SF and NYC. In her spare time, you can find her playing with her son, Jackson, playing the name game, exploring her human design. She's a projector. I'm a manifesting generator. We should talk about this. Hiking with her husband, Greg, and planning her next taco night. Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, it's always so humbling hearing your own bio read to you. I'm like, oh wow, I need to edit some things.
No, I love it. I think your bio is so good. And I love that I got a little bit of a moment to like shout you out because I started going to your events in 2016, which was
2016.
right. And it was right around the time when I was barely post divorce, but I was very much in need of growing my business. And I had never really networked before for my business. And I was terrified of it because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to approach people. I didn't know what to talk about. And I loved your event so much because you made it so easy to talk to people. You have a special structure at the networking events that you host. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Totally. And I loved having you at every single event. And I just have to say, we did so many amazing fun things together. You hosted workshops for us. You photographed our hairstyling and headshot event. But at each event, you get everyone's bios pre-event. So I call it like the pre-stalking book, essentially. So you can read up on everyone's bios, pictures, job titles, companies, and emails. So you can match faces to names, what people do. And then the bio, I think, is so important too, because you could be a lawyer and you could just see that a person's a lawyer. And if you just knew that they were a lawyer, you might write them off because they're boring and they're a stuffy lawyer. And I don't need a lawyer in my network. But a bio allows you to really express yourself and be creative and be fun and show that personality beyond what your day job is. And so at each event, I handpick who you meet. So you typically meet 2 people for 15 minutes each, and then we have an hour of programming. And what I love is while you're meeting 2 people, you're probably going to meet at least 4 people, because then your matches are like, oh my God, Paige, you need to meet this person. I just had a great connection with her. And so it lends itself nicely for people to continue the connection in a genuine way.
It truly is such a warm environment and such a wonderful way to ease into a networking event, which I know when I talk to creatives, a lot of times it gives them anxiety to go to a networking event. And it gives you a very clear sense of like certainty that like you're going to meet somebody on purpose. They're going to want to be there just as much as you. They're going to enjoy conversation with you. It just takes so much, it takes so much of the anxiety around it and gives you peace of mind.
Totally. And I think one of my pain points that I experience, and I try to go to an event that is not mine at least once a week to feel uncomfortable, just to challenge myself, because I'm super duper extroverted and I too feel anxious and I still feel that the first event jitters. And I love structure. And I've realized this about myself. Like once I know, it's like a workout class. Like if I know that I have to hold a plank for a minute, I can hold a plank for a minute. But if you just tell me to hold a plank, I'm like, oh, I'm on my knees. So,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
the same thing with a networking event. Like I went to one the other day that was not mine. It was lovely. It said started at 4, ended at 7. So I got there at 4:05. I was the first one there.
Oh,
There was
no.
no agenda. No one even introduced themselves or like set the scene of where we were or why we were gathering. And it just made me reflect of like, I need to know like who's the host? Who should I ask for? What should I expect? So I try to answer and anticipate all of the questions people have before they even arrive.
That is so lovely because that is such a big part of it. Like when you show up and there's no structure, there's no like, why are we here? There's nobody like bringing everyone together. It gives this really like feeling of limbo of like, okay, who makes the
Yeah.
first move? How do I do this? And you take that out of the equation and you make it so clear and like so straightforward. Okay, I love it so much. So I know I'm saying how much I love it a lot, you guys, but I'm
Well,
so
she's
serious.
fired.
Like
Here's the $5 I promised you. Thank you so much. Well, Paige, the other thing too is I don't know if you've ever been to a networking event. First off, if we went to a networking event together, I would probably say to you, don't leave me and don't make eye contact with someone else because I don't want them to talk to us because we're just connecting. And in reality, like you shouldn't bring your friends to a networking event. You should go out to dinner or you should go get drinks or you should, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
because otherwise you're like deflect or you're taking away from your own opportunities
Hmm.
unless you have a really cool girlfriend who's an independent Nelly. Second, too, I think that have you ever been stuck in a conversation? Like you've been trapped before? You're like,
Yes. Yes.
I don't-
Tell us how we navigate.
Jesus effing Christ. Like, what do I do? How do I get out of here?
Yeah. It's like you end up in a conversation where you're like, that's crazy. Oh my gosh. Over and over and over again until you're like, how do I move gently out of this moment?
How do I get explosive diarrhea right now so I can Uh, just kidding. Don't do that. That'd be gross. Yeah, no, I've been there and I'm also so cognizant and fearful of being that person that both on that side of things, I try to kind of set like a 15-minute timer in my brain when I talk to people. And so what I like to do is I'll do a few things to exit these conversations is I get their information and I'm a big fan of not business cards. I know this is very controversial, folks, but I have like buckets of business cards from events and I don't really do anything with them. And I feel guilty throwing them away. And that
Yeah.
just makes me a hoarder. So I'm not a fan of business cards. And so I've been using what I typically do is I just open up my phone app. I tee up an email to the person right then and there. And I say like, let's continue this conversation or let's talk about the event. So like there's a plan of action.
Mhm.
And so then it closes the loop and I'm like, Paige, it was so wonderful meeting you. I can't wait to finish talking about planning an event together. I am going to continue mingling and meeting peeps tonight, but I can't wait to talk on the 4th. We already have our date set. And I'll see you tonight. I'll see you around.
That is magical advice. That's
It is
amazing.
easy. And I'm not breaking hearts.
You're not, and I've seen you do it. It makes people excited because they're like, oh, great, this is really, they feel like there's really
Yeah.
movement forward. And it's better than what I do. I always try to rope other people in. Like I'm always like stuck in the conversation and I'm like, oh my God, Jane, you should really hear about this. And I'm like, if I can bring other people in, I might be able to stem out. But that I
I do
think
that
is
too. I like that one too. I think that is a beautiful one. Don't discredit. I think that's great. I love like acting as like a matchmaker and being like, oh my God, she's from Oklahoma. Didn't you go to school in Oklahoma? Here you go. And then I'm gonna go refill my glass. Does anyone want anything? And usually people say no, and you peace out and you're in the back door.
I love that. And that takes such a load off, especially I feel like creatives, we get so in our minds about like, well, and we are artists and we're like, well, I'm an artist. Like my work can
Mhm.
speak for itself. I don't need to go out and promote it. Like it's always like networking feels icky, sales feels icky, blah, blah, blah. And it truly is so different than that. It's truly such a time of connection. And I feel like all of the energy around networking the way it used to be is being rebuilt into like something new. And I feel like what you bring to networking is such a big part of like how things can shift into a way that like feels exciting to go network, feels exciting to talk with people and connect with people.
I thank you for saying that because I think networking is like been added as a dirty word to the dictionary for some reason. And rather it is that thrill you get of meeting a new person. Like,
Mhm.
why can't we just reframe networking as like a micro educational session? Because every time I talk to someone, I learn and I have a thirst for knowledge. So like each person is a vessel to teach me and and help me grow and vice versa. And I think it's like an information exchange. So while you're an artist, maybe I don't know anything about building websites on Show It, and you teach me about a whole new platform that I wasn't familiar with. And then I go and hire you 2 years later, but like you poured into my cup and I poured back into your cup, but it doesn't have to be a transaction.
I love that. It's so good. And it makes it so much more like palatable when you can just shift into thinking like, I'm just connecting with people. I'm just sharing the love of what I do with other people.
Yeah. And I always like to think of myself as just being super generous. Like, what if there's one person whose life you can change tonight for maybe the way they think, or like maybe they're working out at a new workout studio, or they make one tiny little shift, and that ripple effect in the overall plan of this world is because of you went out to that event. That's so cool to think about.
Isn't that amazing?
Mhm.
One of my favorite questions, and this is something that I do with my family, but I think this is a great question, like for overall, like when I want to learn, I'm really big right now. I'm in a space right now where I really want to learn about my parents. I want to ask them all of the questions that I kind of wish I had asked my grandparents. Right.
Mhm.
And so my favorite way to learn about people is what is your sliding doors moment? Did you ever see that movie,
Oh
Sliding
my
Doors?
God.
I love that
Talk about
movie.
it all the
Love that
time.
movie. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're listening and you're not sure what sliding doors is, there's a movie from like 1988, I think, and it has
1998. Yeah. Yeah.
right, it has
Yeah.
Gwyneth Paltrow in it, and it follows her through a day in her life where she goes to work, she leaves work early, and she hops on the train at the last second and makes it home to like find her boyfriend cheating on her, and it changes the whole direction of her life. And then you reverse a little bit and you see a version of her world where she misses the train by just a second. And what happens when she does not make it home in time to catch her boyfriend cheating on her. And it's such a split in a timeline, and it's
Yeah.
such a small thing. And so I think about that all the time. Like
Same.
what's your sliding doors moment? Like what's a small thing in your life that
Mhm.
changed everything? That's kind of a big question. So,
Yeah.
do you
That's a
have?
great question. Oh my God. And
Right.
also, like, I love asking these deep questions to my husband right before he goes to bed. He's like, Jesus, Emily, like, is there an off button on you? Like, why do you have to ask? I'm like, are you where you think you should be at 42 years old? He's like, oh my God. What's your relationship like with your father? Are you
Yep.
happy with this?
Yes.
Why
Yes.
do you do this to me? I love that question. I would say my sliding doors moment would be, so when I left fashion, I started what is now Second Degree Society in 2014, and I was working in fashion, and I kept thinking like, well, what am I going to be after I leave fashion? Like, I don't think
Mhm.
fashion's my forever. I'm unsure what to do next. Should I go to business school? Should I get a master's? Should I go to General Assembly and learn how to code? Like, I had no idea. My future was so blocked.
Mhm.
It was just this wall. And I ended up leaving Tory Burch and going to Intermix. And then I remember being like, oh, maybe it's a change of scenery. I just need a new company and I'll feel better. And at Intermix, there was a moment that I was like shining. And then there was a moment that my boss and I just didn't see eye to eye. And essentially, I I guess I wouldn't say, yeah, I guess I was on like a PIP, or like a performance improvement plan. And there was that moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm about to be fired. And I've never been fired before. And I don't think I ever even told this story before. But there was this moment of like, oh my God, I could fight tooth and nail and I could make this happen and I could make this work. Or I could also like leverage this company and go to another company, or I could bet on myself. And there was so much fear because there was shame involved. There is like, I want to be loved and adored by all. Like, I don't want to be the girl who is fired. I don't want to be the F up. Like, that was a lot to swallow. Um, but instead of just band-aiding it and kind of like Spider-Maning to the next sticky thing, I chose myself. And I think the sliding doors moment was taking that bet on like, can I make this happen or not?
That's
And
amazing.
here we 8 years later. So still
That's
at the game.
amazing. Yeah. That
Yeah.
I love that. I love that because it feels like a small thing, but I feel like being in the pivotal moment, it rarely feels like the pivotal moment. You don't fully recognize it until you're like, a few years out of it and you go, okay, well, thank goodness I made that choice. Isn't that
Thank
wild?
And then I'll say my second one too. And you probably met me like right at this moment. I met my husband in 2016 at a bachelorette party in New Orleans. I don't know if you know the story. I lived in New York City. He lived in San Francisco. And we were at a music festival called Hogs for a Cause. And my girlfriends all went back in a separate car to the house with the exception of one. We were like waiting for them at the exit. They went at a different exit, texted us, and we're like, "You're home, right?" Because we didn't see you and we left. It's like, you bitches. And so my friend, my friend and I are trying to get an Uber, and this is still like early Uber-ish days, 2016, and it said 0 cars available. And the service was crap. We're in the middle of nowhere in New Orleans, and I see a group of boys on the corner, and I'm like, they have an Uber. There's enough of them. They're all staring at their phone. They're waiting. So I approach one, and it was my husband. And that relationship, I ended up getting my own Uber. I was trying to steal his, but ended up getting my own. We exchanged information. He lived in San Francisco. He had all the social cues of connectivity. So this is a pro networking tip too.
Oh.
Look for like cues of connectivity of how you can make connection. Like he had an SF hat on. So I was like, oh, do you live in
Oh.
SF?
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I live in SF. Like it's a great way to ice break. And I was going to San Francisco the next month to launch a chapter of my company. And so we exchanged information. I was like, I would love if you introduced me to every woman you know. What a pickup line, right?
That's amazing.
And fast forward, I went out there, we continued our relationship, but there was that choice also of like making it from a potential to a relationship and then also deciding to leave my beloved New York for San Francisco.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, I have so many questions
I know.
because you are
Gave you a lot of fodder.
because you have a lot of events across the country. You have them in New
Yes.
York, you have them in San Francisco, you have them in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
Tell me about wait. Okay, at what point when you've met this guy
Mhm.
with the SF hat, at what point, this isn't a business question, this is just a question. At what point were you like, oh, this is the guy. This is the guy, and I'm gonna change my whole life and move across the country for him.
So we knew like early on, I was like, I don't feel the like immediate need to create an escape route, which I felt like I always did. Same with companies too. I always was prepared for back to that like Spider-Man analogy of like swinging to the next thing if I had to. And I didn't feel that with him. Like when I visited San Francisco, and I always tell him this, like I closed all my doors that I had in New York open. And I was like, let me like give this just like a one door chance. And then I liked him in San Francisco. I thought it was a fluke. Oh, fun fact, I almost like broke up with him after the first date. He had red roses. He was waiting for me outside with red roses. And I was like, oh,
Ugh.
I'm gonna destroy him.
Oh
Um
no. Oh
one more sliding doors moment. Then he came and visited New York. This is so we've like only met 3 times. And I was gonna tell him I was falling in love with him. And then he told me he was falling in love with me. And we became boyfriend girlfriend that weekend. And he changed his Facebook profile to a picture of us.
my
And
gosh.
everything in my body was like, what the fuck? Like, who does he think he is? Like, he didn't even ask my permission beforehand. Oh God, this is gonna be
Wow.
bad.
Mhm.
And so that was like my flight brain. And then my logical brain was like, Emily, you've always wanted to be loved and adored. This man loves and adores you. You love and adore him. But because he's like showing it, you're freaking the F out. And so luckily that brain took over and
Mm.
we're now married and he's not as adoring as of me as he used to be because we have a child, but it's cool.
I love that story though. I love that story because it's also you calling the shots. Like you're not so worried about what does he want. You're very clear on like what do I want? And I think that's always the most important question. What do I want here?
Well, so I said to him, I was like, I'm an entrepreneur now. I can't waste my time on dating. I need to know, like, these are the
Mhm.
things that I want in my life. But I did a long distance relationship before him, and he moved to New York for me, and I hated him. Like, I hated this guy, not my husband, the guy before.
Mhm.
And so I was like, you know what? You don't know a person until you know them on a Wednesday. So
Oh
I
my
think I should
God.
live with you. So like literally month 4, I moved out to San Francisco for 3 weeks to test it out.
Mhm.
So we could have this trial period of, do we like living together? Do we like each other enough to spend Wednesdays together?
Mhm.
And then a year and a half later, I think another like pivotal moment was me deciding to move to him
Mhm.
versus asking him to come to move to me, which I did.
Amazing.
But here we are.
I love that. And when you know, you know. I've known
Yeah.
so many people who just go in and say, you know what, we're going to give this a big shot after like 3 or 4 months. And that's usually the relationships that like we get like getting it right. Like when you know, you know. And I think
You
that's
know, and
incredible. Yeah.
again, and I think it's like listening to your body too. Like, do you
Mhm.
want to evacuate immediately or do you want to,
Yeah.
you want to ride it out?
Oh, I love that. Okay, so in addition to events and also knowing what you want in love and life, you're also a coach, and I know you work a lot with creatives, right? Or you expanded beyond creatives?
Creatives, I mean, it's so wild to think of all the people I've worked with, from like everything from florists to people who have created e-commerce sites to a lot of coaches to travel advisors. So I struggle with this a ton,
Mhm.
Paige, in terms of like, oh, I'm for blah.
Yeah, yeah.
I
How do you fill
I
in
can
that
t
blank?
I can tell you,
Mhm.
but I can't tell myself sometimes.
I get you. I totally understand. I feel like you help people who have a really like big zest for their life and their industry, and they want like somebody to run forward with.
Totally. And that's
Mhm.
that's my specialty is the ABCs, like
Mhm.
accountability,
Mhm.
batching, community, connections, really helping people do the dang thing and take that dream that they had and that mess in their brain and make it into a reality. So I guide them, I hold them accountable, and I think like my big special sauce is I connect them with all of the right pieces to the puzzle to make it make sense.
I think that's one of the coolest things that creatives really just get up and decide, I'm going to make whatever I want in the world and then
Yeah.
I'm going to figure out how to sell it. Like, I think that's one of the coolest things. And I also know that like there are a lot of roadblocks along the way. So, one of my questions for you is what roadblocks do you see that creatives most encounter? And like, how much of those are we just putting in our own path?
Oh my gosh. Well, so themselves, first and foremost. No, I think one of my biggest frustrations is when people they come to me and they're like, okay, so I just quit my corporate job and I was making $180,000 and I have 3 months and I need to be making the same amount. Yeah.
Ooh,
And you're like, oh,
ooh,
okay.
okay.
So do you have an audience? And they're like, nope. Oh, and I hate newsletters and I don't want to be on social media and don't even get me started about LinkedIn. And you're like,
Oh.
oh, okay. And so,
Mhm.
oh, and I don't no networking for me. And so I think this mindset of like, if I build it, they will come.
Mhm.
And while I don't love the hustle culture of life, there is a little pep
Mhm.
that you need in your step to get out there to like fly your flag and let people know you exist.
Oh, for sure. And I feel like we come in with this like inherent idea that like the work is the work is the work is the work is the work and the work is the thing that's good and the work is the thing that's going to move everything, and that's actually not it. If you don't tell anybody about the work that you're doing, nothing happens. And that is one of the most heartbreaking realizations to have as a creative, is that the industry is built not just on people who are good at what they do, because not everybody there are a lot of people who are real successful that you might look at and go like, how did they do it? It's because they're showing up and sharing. They're talking about themselves, and they're not worried about if it means something that they're doing it, right? They're not telling themselves a story of like
Totally.
selling is bad, networking is it feels
Fine.
superficial. Like that those stories don't exist for them. They're like, I just got to show up and talk about this because I have a goal here. And then they let it be that. Or do you see other
Totally.
things? Yeah.
Well, I was going to say the other things I see are people creating something and keeping it a secret and not telling
Mm.
anyone about it. They're like, it's so precious, this idea that someone's going to steal it. And I always, what's that movie, Big Magic? Or
Yeah,
that
yeah.
That book, Big
The
Magic,
book.
like
Yeah.
an idea can be fluid. Like you can have an
Mm-hmm.
idea, then maybe I actually did something with the idea. Like you don't
Mm-hmm.
really own anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's problem number one. Problem number two is not asking for help and doing the like do it myself mentality
Mm-hmm.
when there could be someone that's further ahead of you that can actually help you get there faster.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing is a lot of times people building audiences outside of their already existing audiences. So like there's most of us have had LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram for 10 years at least. And yet they're like, oh, I have to get in front of this new audience without telling your old audience or even giving them an
Mm-hmm.
invitation to come and join you. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's fair at all. So
Yeah.
that opportunity to let them know you exist.
Yes.
Um, oh,
It's
and then the
so,
last, oh, sorry, last soapbox, I promise. The ego, the ego of an entrepreneur and a creative,
mm-hmm.
where if I don't buy your painting or if I don't hire you as a photographer,
Mm-hmm.
that means you suck. And
Yes.
I think there's a separation of church and state that needs to happen.
Oh, yes. You have to divorce yourself from
Yeah.
how much money I make also equals how much I am worth as a human. Like it's so difficult because like the good months you feel on top of the world, and then the bad months you're like, I'm the worst photographer, artist, designer, creative, XYZ ever, right? And it doesn't mean that. It just means that like business is business and it goes up and down. But I think all of us start out taking things personally.
Oh,
And
how can you not?
yeah, it's one of the biggest roadblocks ever. Um, and you touched on something earlier that I thought was so interesting. You mentioned how people like make it but hide it,
Yeah.
right? And for numerous reasons. And it's funny because it's so true. Like if you hide it, somebody else will probably have the idea. Like in Big Magic. I've seen it happen over and over again. I've had it happen. Like if I don't act on something, someone else will have that idea and do it themselves. And that's cool, but also I'm like, ah, dang.
And it can deflate the
Mhm,
ego, or it can deflate everything
mhm,
on that. But in
mhm.
terms of like the separation, did you ever read the book, The Alter Ego Effect?
No.
Great. Okay. Fun read for
Okay.
y'all by Todd Herman. And that's the idea that as a business owner or as a performer, like I love the example he gives of Beyonce. Like
Mhm.
Beyonce is like a Southern church going choir girl. But when she is on stage, she is riding up on that surfboard as Sasha Fierce.
Yes.
And she is able to embody that. And then she can be like whoever she is as a normal person. So even when you go into a networking event or a presentation or a pitch, like embodying that other bigger version of self
Mhm.
versus this, oh, they don't want to work with you as a coach. That's not an Emily Merrill problem. Like that's Emily the coach problem
Mm.
and divorcing it from yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that. Those are all so true.
Well, wait, I
Yeah.
have one more. I'm so sorry. You're
Sorry, go
inspiring
ahead.
me so much. Another book, The E-Myth Revisited. Have you read
Ooh,
that one?
no.
Okay. Best book, and I think this is a big mistake creatives make, is they're so precious about like, I'm a pie baker and I make the best pies in the world. But they forget they're also business owners.
Hmm.
And while you're a creative, you're also running a business, which comes from marketing your pies and selling your pies and pricing your pies. And because of that, you should treat your business kind of like a franchise. And maybe you are the pie person and you hire the person who runs the business
Hmm.
with time. But like, how can you systemize your business so you can focus on making the world's best gosh darn pies?
Right? Exactly. Because especially if you decide that like because you make the best pies, it makes you the best person, right? You have to divorce yourself from the good things. Like you have to divorce yourself from the bad things. A bad month
Mhm.
doesn't mean you're a bad person, but even the best moments, somebody gives you you won an Oscar for being the best pie baker in the whole world, right?
Right.
Like even in those moments, you have to divorce yourself from it because if you hold on so tightly, that's all you'll ever focus on. And like what goes up, like you might continue to be the world's best pie baker forever, but like don't you want to give yourself take a little bit of pressure off? Like don't you want to have a minute to just sit and like not think about it to like step back. Like, don't you want to have the freedom to be this, but also maybe not be this all the time? Like, it's
Yeah.
right. We have to divorce ourselves just a little bit.
And
Yeah.
and I found that at the beginning of my business, and I'm sure we're all guilty of this, but like all I wanted to do was talk about my business. And,
Same.
with everyone,
Yeah.
I feel like we go through stages of everything in our lives, like workouts. You want to talk only about the workouts or shows you're reading or shows you're watching or books you're reading, but
Mhm.
your business is such a part of your identity that I feel like your friends can be like, all right, Emily, I get it. You started a networking business. Cool, cool. Can we like talk about normal stuff?
Yeah.
And so remembering that, like, sure, you're a business owner and that's awesome and so brave, but
Mhm.
also you're a person and you can have person problems.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. You get to be a human too. And
Hmm.
you really do tell yourself like you have to be superhuman in so many ways. You have to have superhuman time and superhuman knowledge and superhuman skills. And God, man, that's exhausting.
I
Like
know. Take naps. Take naps,
take naps.
folks.
It can just be running a business. The other thing that I want to add on is um people being afraid that like if they share something it'll get stolen. But the thing is like if you share something and it's good, it will get copied. People will copy it,
Yeah.
people will steal it. And that is not the end of the world, right? Like I've had this happen multiple times, and like depending on how egregious it is it determines how I handle it, right? But I always take it as, well, one, that's okay, that means people are paying attention, and that's what I
Yeah.
wanted anyway, people paying attention.
Yeah.
Two, this is not the end of the world because like I'm not winning pie baking Oscars. Like I'm a good photographer, but like, I'm not like I'm not like shooting the cover of Vogue. If somebody like clips me, like I don't need to be overwhelmed by it, or like I don't need to
Yeah.
stay mad about it. Because number three, I take it as a sign. It's as like, okay, well, whatever they took, it's time for me to move on from it. I got to make something new now, because this is about to get repeated, and it's gonna get old, and I want to stay new. I want to stay at the front. So
Well,
people will take it if it's good, and that's not a
and I
different
think
world.
that's we always heard this as a kid too. Like copying is like the
Mhm.
biggest form of flattery.
Mhm.
But I think it's the same thing like when you're building a business, and this is another piece of advice I'd give is like a lot of people don't do market research. They're
Mhm.
like, oh, this just needs to exist because I think it needs to exist.
Mhm.
And it's the idea is not validated. They quit their job and then they do it and they're like, oh, no one's validated this idea. Why did I risk so much? So a big piece
Mhm.
of advice for creatives that I recommend is like test out the market before you make a all-in jump if you can.
Yeah.
Um, but I was gonna say in terms of oh my God, validation copying. Oh, competition.
Mhm.
If you're like, I'm gonna become a photographer and you Google LA photographer and there are a million LA photographers out there, that's a great sign
Mhm.
that people need photographers.
Yes. Yes. Yes, absolutely. And when you're first entering into it and you see everybody out here and you're like, there's so much going on, which is a good sign. Like your market is valid. I also think people come in and don't fully understand, like there's a learning curve to figuring out how business works. And like a lot of people just copy other people because they just don't know any better and they don't know
Yeah.
any different. It takes them a while to like figure it out. When I first started my business, I was actually Courtney Page photography. Oh, I shouldn't tell this story. No, I'm going to tell it, but I'm just going to try and make it anonymous. And there was another photographer in my market, that in Los Angeles that started a business with basically the exact same name. I might cut this part out because I don't want to like,
Okay.
I don't know if she's still in business, but at the time I was starting to get, um, uh, her inquiries and she was getting mine. And
What?
somebody who wanted to book me for a job accidentally hired her and then realized what happened and then found a way to contact me to like hire me. It was kind of a wild moment. And when I started looking into like who is doing this, like what is going on here, I realized like, oh, she's a student. She does not understand market confusion. She doesn't understand like what's really why this is an issue and why like you should research your market a little bit before you jump into it and like make sure like you're not causing problems right from the get-go. It was an interesting time. But
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a wild ride to be able that someone's like wanting to book you and then like messes up and books the other person. That's
Yeah.
bizarre.
Yeah, that
And,
was interesting.
yeah, you're like, and now I'm Paige. So here we go. We're gonna change it.
Exactly, exactly. I'm probably going to take that story out because people are going to know to go. I don't want anybody like looking her up, but
Okay.
what a time. What a
What a
time.
time. Well, it's a story for us, and that's all that matters.
I know. I love that. Okay, good. So now you've got a lot going on. You're a coach, you're an event host, you run businesses, you run a mastermind. You have so much that you're doing, and you're also a mom. You're also an amazing mom. And I know there are people out there listening who run a business and they're a mom and they're creative and there are a lot of dreams going on and a lot to juggle. Can you talk to us a little bit about like how do you do that? That's
Yeah. We like to,
amazing.
but how? Well, give me one sec. I'm gonna let my dog out.
For sure.
Sorry.
You're good.
Oh my gosh. Come on. Out. Hello. She always cries middle of a podcast. It's like her guarantee. So so I have a 2-year-old. I have a tiny little tyrant who's 2, who's gonna be 2.5 sooner than later. And I'll have to say, I want to caveat a few things for people. One, I lived in New York City, so I thrive on a little sleep, like I'm a psychopath. 2, routine and structure, as I mentioned at the top of this episode, is really important for getting things done. So some things early on when Jackson was a baby, we didn't have like full-time support. I you have to get creative on like how am I going to get work done while having a small little kid. And the beautiful thing about babies that I feel like people don't advertise enough is that they sleep a ton. And so often when they're small, like I had this thing called a dock-a-tot, and I would just dock him and like get work done while he was sleeping. And then one of the priorities for us was getting him sleep trained really early on. And that's not for every parent. Some parents listening might be like, that's cool. My kid hasn't slept through the night in 12 years. Like, and I know every kid's different, but sleep was a big priority for my husband and I. So we sleep trained him at 12 weeks. And so by sleep training him, we were able to have nap schedules set. And so knowing his nap schedules, I was able to schedule things during his nap time that were important. And he was very regular. And then the times that I didn't have, he wasn't sleeping, I accosted the waitress at the restaurant next to our house. And she was like a college girl. I was like, hey, can you babysit? Can I pay you, to
Mhm.
come in between classes? So we started off slowly, just integrating someone taking care of him.
Mhm.
It was beautiful because also if I did have her stay during the nap times, I would have her like fold our laundry, or I'd hire her from my business and make TikToks for me.
Nice. I love
So
that.
like she's not just on her phone TikToking alone, she's
Mhm.
TikToking and getting paid for it.
Nice.
But then I was able to subsidize the childcare through my business,
Mhm.
childcare. And then with time we graduated to a nanny share, which meant we had one other baby in it, and we did like 1 week at our house and then 1 week at the other family's house. And so it was like an introduction to getting them out of the house. It was challenging working with someone who got sick a lot, like the nanny got sick
Mhm.
a lot. And then when he was about a year old, a little over a year, we got him into daycare. And I don't know about your upbringing, but like we didn't have daycares in my like where we grew up. I feel like
Mhm.
I lived in Florida as a kid. Like there were more senior citizen places than like daycares, you know?
Right.
So I always was like, oh, I wouldn't send my kid to daycare. That's wild. Ugh. Now I'm like, everyone should be in daycare. This is amazing. So we got him into daycare through a lot of hustling on my part and having consistent childcare Monday through Friday from
Mhm.
8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. I can get stuff done.
That's amazing.
So it definitely was a gradual thing. And then there's been days he's been sick. My husband works from home. Every time I travel, Jackson will get sick or something. And then my husband works from home too. He will be the hero dad because he's like taking care of a sick child. But when I'm home and he's a sick child, I'm just a mom. So
Mm.
there's some things that you factor in. And yeah, I would say most people, thanks to the pandemic, thanks to like the way life works, people
Mhm.
understand the juggle, the hustle, the things that you move around for a kid.
That's amazing. What about, can I ask you about like the emotions that come with that? Because that's a lot on your plate. Like, are there emotions that come up when you feel like, okay, well, now I need to go do this, now I need to go do that. How do I figure this out? How does that look? How do you manage that part of it?
Yes. So, pre-baby, I loved my mornings for getting stuff done. And like that's the most productive time of my day. So what I had to look at, it was like my own time and schedule. So I wake up at 5 and I like to work from like 5 to 7. And it's important for me to fill my own cup. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
that has been a non-negotiable with both of us since the beginning. Like I need to work out. So at the beginning, I love morning workouts. I've recently restructured my days where I'll do like an afternoon workout instead so I can really get my hard work done in the morning. Um, so the emotions though, yeah, I think the emotions of like asking for help feel really weird. I think the emotions of like when I left him the first time to travel, and I've shared this before, but this is going to sound really harsh. I felt like I wasn't a mom. Like I left and there was a moment where I empathized so greatly for people who left their families.
Wow.
I was like, I understand. I get it. You're like, my brain was so, I was a
Hmm.
single girl. I visited a girlfriend in LA. Like we got drinks. We stayed out late.
Hmm.
Like, oh, I could see if like my mental health was a little
Mm. Hmm.
on the
Hmm.
edge, you can just walk out of your life.
Yeah, okay, so I think this is so important because I think that okay, I'm not a mom, but I think that we need to give moms space to say the things that they need to say and feel the way that they need to feel and let that be valid and heard, no matter what it is. So
I
thank
also
you for sharing.
Of course. I also didn't feel, and a lot of people totally lie about this, and they're like, oh my God, I felt the most overwhelming joy when I held him. I wanted a sandwich and like a pat on the back to say
Yeah,
that I was a badass.
yeah.
And I like, they like throw this gooey thing at you, and
Mhm.
they're like, this is your thing that was inside knocking on your belly for the last 9 months. And I was like, are they going to clean you off first? And he had super long fingernails. And I was like, he was
Really?
like these small little alien. I was like, oh, good to meet you. Welcome.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Did somebody get you a sandwich? I feel like it's important
Oh,
in
I
that
got a
moment.
grilled. Oh, absolutely. I got a
Nice.
grilled cheese, and then I got a girlfriend like brought like a legit sandwich. It was so glorious to eat.
Nice.
It's like,
Nice.
oh yeah. But I do think that there's people build so much pressure into like this overwhelming love, and it felt like dating, truthfully. Like I love
Interesting.
I love him. I
Mhm.
love him so much. But it took time for me to develop that
Mm.
that love and to like fall in love with my child.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that because I think that's an important perspective, an important experience.
Yeah, and it might be different for everyone. It might be different how long they were pushing the baby out. It might be different how long they were trying for a baby.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I love the little weirdo so much. But I also like we've had a good sense of humor about him, and
Mhm.
we travel a ton too. Like as a
Mhm.
mom, I think a lot of people seek me out when they're like, I don't know if I want to have kids, but the way that you're painting motherhood right now makes it look like you can still have a life. Can I talk to you? Which has been
Yeah.
really like an honor. And so we live our lives and we have this little like roommate that comes with us, which is super cool.
I love that. I love that. Oh, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
The other there's one more thing I want to ask you about. And one thing I've noticed, when I talk to people who are successful and really like leading their industry, what I notice is they're not afraid to ask for what they need or what they want, and they're like not worried about the answer. Like it's a yes or it's a no, and there's no like nobody takes it personally. And I think that, and I find that fascinating. And I feel like you're such a good asker. Like you ask, and like I would love to know more about how you build your mindset around asking for what you need, or I don't know, what do you think about that?
I think I'm chuckling because I was talking to Bailey the other day and she was like, "Oh, I was like sending a proposal out and I thought of you." I was like, "Channel my Emily Merrill, just like ask for it." And why the fuck not?
Mhm.
Like I was like,
Exactly.
really? I do that? I think it goes back to when I'm asking for things, a lot of times it's not on behalf of me, it's on behalf of like a greater good.
Mm,
So for example, I'm coming back to LA I'm hosting an event on March 21st. And I went through, I think like 16 pages of LinkedIn asking people if they know of any venues. Because venues that all of the venues we partnered with in the past are typically donated. Like
mm,
we'll partner with co-working spaces or retail stores. And these are people that I have met maybe through networking, maybe through my career, like, and asking for help is such a vulnerable thing, but I'm
mm,
asking for help so then I can then put something on that is going to benefit not just me, but it's going to benefit the people that attend and experience it. So, kind of like falling on the sword for something else is what I
mm.
think of
I
when I
love that.
ask.
I love that. I hope
I
that
love when I
motivates.
give things.
I hope that motivates people to just ask for a little bit more because I've never met any woman in business that I think is asking for enough. I never
Mhm.
look at any woman in business and go like, you're asking for too much. No, we're never asking for enough. I hope
Well,
we ask for more.
but it is funny though. Like I have a girlfriend. She recently posted like how much she charges for mentorship, and I was like, my initial reaction was like, Jesus, that's so much money. Like, who does she think she is to ask for that much money?
Hmm.
And then I realized like whenever we have that reaction, like it's something to do with me.
Hmm.
And it's my trigger going like, well, shit, am I not asking for enough money?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I go through the exact same steps. I'll see people post about their prices and I'm like, dang, okay, that's quite the number. And then I remind myself, like, okay, let's sit with this because all this is like you just don't think that you're worth
Yeah,
um that number. So what if you were worth it? I use it as like a leveling up opportunity. I'm like, okay, well, what if I thought I was worth this number that looks so grand? And try to just level set with people who are further ahead than me, which I love doing.
totally. Yeah. And then you're like the whole body shaking as you're like, I now charge $4 billion for
Right.
1 hour.
Yes. Yes. I actually, this year, 2024 is a year where I am really going big with my prices and I feel good about it. That's not a constant thing. That's not a consistent thing. Like, I'm like, oh, this is a lot of thousands of dollars that I tell people that I charge for, for a photo shoot. And I'll have times where I'm like, oh, I feel great about this. This is exactly where I should be. And then I'll have times where I drop off and I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Am I going to torpedo everything that I've worked for? And then I'll see a
Yeah.
post from like there's this one account on Instagram called I think it's called a photo editor,
Mm.
and they will post. People will submit like photography proposals for big jobs. They'll submit it. Sometimes I don't think it's fully anonymous. Like some people will say this. They'll be able to publish who's doing those quotes, and the quote is like for $115,000 to do a shoot, and I'm like. I'm still nowhere near where I need to be.
Wow.
And that always blows my mind. And then I'm like, okay, yes, my prices are fine. I need to not double think this. There's truly like there's no. I think there's like a base that we don't need to drop below, but for the rest of it, like the sky's the limit when it comes to like pricing and everything. Like sky's the limit. Like I just feel like do whatever you want because there's somebody out there charging more and they're doing it. They're booking with it.
And they're usually a white straight male
Hmm.
who has the confidence. I have a friend who is he's so talented. He's a male, and he charges a lot for weddings.
Yeah.
I forgot the numbers are in terms of like how many photos he turns around.
Hmm.
And I'm like, do you have an onboarding gift? Like, does this come with an engagement photo
Hmm.
session? And he's like, no, no. And I'm like, you're just charging that money straight out and like there's nothing else involved. And he's
Hmm.
like, yeah. Like, okay. And he's
Yeah.
getting a lot of these relation or like he knows a wedding planner and they're just being hand delivered to his plate. When I then think of like my wedding photographer in that like over the top experience she delivered to me with for a fraction
Hmm.
less, and the engagement shoot and the thoughtful like champagne flute sent to me and the beautiful champagne bottle. Like
Hmm.
everyone will do it differently.
Hmm.
That doesn't make it right or wrong.
And it's so true. And I always, a lot of times when I'm feeling in doubt, I'll just, or not just when I'm feeling in doubt, but there does end up being pushback. There are people that are, I did have somebody recently who was like aghast at my prices. And they were basically like, wow, I didn't know you'd raised your prices to such a degree. That's a lot of money. And I just reminded myself that like all I'm doing is charging something closer to what the men in my industry charge. Like I'm not charging that much. I'm just getting closer to what the men are charging. And that really, there are some people that are not into that. And I think it's always interesting when I get a reaction because I'm like, you're just mad that I'm doing what men are doing. And
Totally.
mm,
And I think price objections, I actually recorded a podcast with Lexi for Ready Set Coach community today about price objections. Like, people will be willing to pay for certain things, no problem. And maybe, well, I'm going to say $1,500, for example. They're like, oh, $1,500 in my business, easy peasy, return on investment. But $1,500 in a health coach, ooh, that's a
mhm,
lot because it's something that's like bettering them and they
mhm,
don't necessarily see the return on investment. So I imagine sometimes with photos,
mhm.
unless they're like, oh, yeah, of course, I'm redoing my website. This totally makes sense.
Yeah.
People need an education.
It is interesting. I think that part of what photographers specifically are kind of working against these days is how easy and ubiquitous photos have become, right? We do it on our phone, we upload it to Instagram, and we see good photography on Instagram, and we I think have really intuited how to make good photography ourselves. So it feels not that far off. Like when you have your
Yeah.
camera in your hand, I think a lot of people feel like good photography is not that far off from their own like pressing a button. And so the thought of like paying somebody to do that feels like a big leap. And I get that. But photographers, we just got to keep showing up and like putting our work out there.
A
Um,
1000%.
yeah.
And once you've actually experienced good photography,
Hmm.
there's no looking back.
It's so true. It's so
Hmm.
true.
Yeah, it's like traveling first class. You're like, shit, did I do
I
that to
know.
myself? Oh no, now I'm a peasant coach again.
Well, and this is a totally different conversation, but 10 years ago, flying and coach was such a different experience than it is now. I am just
Oh,
like,
remember when you got food? They'd be
yeah,
like, "Would you like a veggie burger?" I'm like, sure, of course. Oh, I have a knife. This is incredible. And now it's like, would you like the processed peanuts or do you want the candy bar? You're like,
exactly.
what? Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
it's a cluster.
it is.
Anywho, but yeah, I think the price thing's interesting, price objections. And I do think like if someone wants to work with you, you as a provider will find a way to work with the person that fits
Mhm.
like their price objections. Maybe it's going to be like a monthly payment plan rather
Mhm.
than a pay in full, or
Yeah.
maybe it's adjusting like you're not getting 300 photos, you're going to get 30
Mhm.
in my mini shoot that I offer once a year.
Exactly. Exactly. It's exactly that. And I always tell people, like, when I was doing the mentorships, I would tell people, like if people want to work with you, like you're that you won't be able to stop them from working with you. Like they will find a way to do it. Like your prices won't matter so much to them. They'll be so excited that they will just find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
And that at the end of the day, like that feels as an artist, that feels really satisfying because you're like somebody was really dedicated to like work, like having my presence in this artwork that they wanted. And I think that's amazing. I think that's so cool.
And everyone should treat themselves to photography. I think it's like therapy, photography,
Hmm.
like a good hairstylist, like all of those things
Exactly.
you shouldn't scrimp on.
Agree. 100% agree. Tell us what you have going on. What do you have that you've got going on lately with all of your businesses?
All of my businesses. Well, so back to the overwhelm that we were talking about earlier, I just want to share with people that if you like structure and schedule, that is definitely something it's doable. Like you can be a busy, overwhelmed person, and a lot of people will say to me, like, I don't have time for things. And then just go back to like look at what time, where is your time being spent? So in terms of time and things that I have coming up right now, I am really excited. I'm still offering one-on-one coaching, which I love. I think, again, just helping someone take what the little precipice of like an idea or the start of their business and actually put those systems into place so we can create time, we can create structure. You can take your weekends back. So if you are a mom or you want to be a mom, you can, or you're just a person who wants to have a life, like that's doable. I live a very vibrant life. I read a lot of books. I watch a lot of TV. I see a lot of people. I travel a lot. And I still run businesses. Like it's doable if you want it to be. In addition to that, so over on the Ready Set Coach front, so my co-founder Lexi, we met in LA in probably like the last time I saw you in February of 2020. And we developed an online friendship, started Ready Set Coach, and we have a free community for those who are curious about coaching or want to already have a coaching business. And then we have a on-demand program called the Launch Pack. So we help people launch their coaching business with like the step-by-step playbook on launching their coaching business, with also getting support from us via the community. And then over at Second Degree Society, we're hosting weekly events virtually, like Psychopath I Am, with all different topics. We also have the in-person aspect. Paige, we have to get you to one of my virtual events too.
I would
Like
love that.
we're gonna talk about that post show. And then I'm launching my mastermind coming up this month. So it's just such a fun way to bring people together and to like marry community with accountability. And I love throwing out throwing out ideas, but like in a mastermind, as you know, it's not just about my ideas,
Mhm.
it's about the feedback from others as well.
I love that. I will put all of those links in the show notes. I
Thank
actually
you.
do. I have one more question that I just thought
Yeah.
of while you were talking. So I am in a current state of like, okay, I do love being able to virtual network, but I feel like it doesn't leave the same impression as in-person networking. So do you have any tips for when you do virtual networking to make that as impactful in terms of relationship building than as in-person networking? Because
Yeah.
I feel like when I'm done at virtual networking, I feel like whoever I met, I feel like they fall out of my brain too fast. And I think, well, then maybe I'm falling out of theirs. And like, what did
Mhm.
I spend my time well? What do
How
you
do I do
think?
this?
Hmm.
Well, come to my events because you'll meet the whole room. You'll get handpicked matches. It's going to be so much more accessible and fun. You get all the list of people. But I think if you're going to a room that's more like you're watching an event, or but you see the names of people, some fun hacks that I do is as the person's talking, I'll go through and I'll add each person to LinkedIn and I'll send them a message, or on Instagram, whatever your platform is, and send them a message, be like, hey, I saw you at the Paige Ray Creative talk today. And your business looks so amazing. Like I had to friend you. Would you be open for like a coffee, like a virtual coffee connection, and drop your Calendly there? If you actually want to pay attention to the speaker, maybe just screenshot the list of the names, like when you have it in positioned in a way, and you can add them later. Another thing I do, if there's intros of each person, I'll go around, like post their intro and be like, oh my God, that sounded amazing. I'd love to hear more. Can we talk about collaboration? And that Calendly link is my best friend.
I love that. I love that. That's so helpful.
Yeah. So then you can also, if you have with Calendly, or the other thing I do is I give people typically like a free invite to come to a virtual event. Once they sign up for the event, they're on my mailing list. So if they
Oh,
show
nice.
up, or if they don't show up, they're still on
Mhm.
my mailing list.
Oh, that's such an incredible. Oh, I love that. Okay, so mailing list is one of my biggest, like, how do I grow this moments? And I used to host virtual networking events all of the time, or more like virtual workshops, I guess. But I never even thought like, yeah, exactly. What a great way to grow. I love that.
Or,
Amazing.
okay, this is going to be unpopular or popular for some people. They're going to either hate me or love me for this. My Calendly, I have whenever someone books a Calendly with me, it hooks up to my mailing list.
I love it.
Hmm.
I love it because that's not just you adding somebody random. That's somebody who said, I'm opting into your world. And
Correct.
that sounds good. Oh, I love that.
And it's automatic with Zapier. You can just like boop, boop, boop. And
Nice.
then they're like in my onboarding forum and they get to know me and all that jazz.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much for this, for everything that you shared today, for taking time. I really appreciate seeing you and
No
chatting
problem.
with you. It's so good to see you.